Have you ever seen a two-bedroom house for $7,000 and thought, that is a scam? Welcome to the United States in 2025, where you can buy an entire house for less than the price of a used car. It sounds unbelievable until you find out why nobody wants to live there. While most of the country is suffocating under mortgages, there are towns quietly offering homes so cheap it feels illegal. But here is what no one tells you. There is always a catch. Sometimes it is a dying town with no jobs, or a slice of paradise with criminals on every corner. Make sure to subscribe, because sooner or later, you will feel the urge to escape. Forget about superficial reviews. We show you the exact details that usually go unnoticed by most. By the time you finish watching, you will face a choice. You will either start packing your bags to move, or you will be racking your brains wondering why it is so suspiciously cheap. Number 10. Youngstown, Ohio. This is the perfect example of what happens when a one-industry town loses that industry and never gets back on its feet. This hub in Northeast Ohio remained a steel-making giant from the beginning of the 20th century, right up until 1977. More than 40,000 people toiled in the massive local factories. Youngstown Sheet and Tube, Republic Steel, U.S. Steel, they all maintained huge operations here. The city was booming. At its peak in the 30s, 170,000 people lived here. That is, until Black Monday arrived on September 19, 1977, a day that has forever entered the region's history as a shameful chapter. The Youngstown Sheet and Tube Company announced a complete shutdown of production. 5,000 jobs evaporated literally overnight. The workers found out about it from the newspapers. The owners lacked even the basic decency to warn them in person. Over the next 5 years, the rest of the metallurgical enterprises collapsed as well. Republic Steel closed its gates in 1979, and U.S. Steel stopped in 1980. By the mid-'80s, the steel industry in Youngstown had died out completely. And what happens when 30% of job vacancies vanish in 5 years? Total collapse. People fled in droves. By the year 2000, Youngstown had lost almost half its population and never recovered. Today, about 60,000 people live there amidst infrastructure designed for 170,000. This means entire neighborhoods are virtually empty. You can buy a 3-bedroom house for $40,000 to $50,000. Some properties go under the hammer for $1,000, or even cheaper. What is the reason? Basic economics. Supply vastly exceeds demand. When there are thousands of empty houses around and only a handful of buyers, the price tag drops to the cost of building materials. The market is at rock bottom. But here is what the listings on Zillow keep quiet about. The purchase price is just the beginning. The housing will likely require renovations costing another $20,000 or even $40,000. The roof leaks. Wiring from the 1950s poses a fire hazard. The pipes are rusty, there is mold in the basement, and the windows are smashed. So your bargain deal for $40,000 instantly turns into expenses of $80,000. So yes, real estate in Youngstown is affordable, but you will find yourself in a city that has been in a terminal stage of decline for 45 years and shows no signs of life. It is cheap there because it is a miserable place to exist if you have any choice at all. Number 9. Harlingen, Texas. Here you can rent a full 2-bedroom house for cheaper than a studio in Cleveland. Yes, that is right, Cleveland. Just think about that. The population is a little over 70,000. This is the deep Rio Grande Valley, practically right next door to Mexico. On the surface, it is nothing but palm trees, eternal sunshine, and price tags that make Los Angeles realtors weep with envy. The location consistently appears in rankings of the cheapest places to live in America. The median home value is around $136,000. In most other corners of the country, that is just the down payment amount. Add to this the lack of state income tax, low property taxes, and tacos on every corner. So why aren't crowds flocking here? Because the word cheap always comes with an asterisk and fine print. The crime situation here is 35% worse than national figures, with theft and car break-ins topping the list. The job market is also, to put it mildly, not exactly blooming. Unemployment consistently exceeds the national average. As one Reddit poster aptly noted, life in Harlingen feels like time traveling to 1998, only the video rental store is still closed for some reason. Real estate is affordable, yes, but salaries match that price tag. And the summer heat. Let's just say the air conditioner will quickly become a full-fledged member of your family. So what is the emotional cost of such a bargain? You will save money, of course, but your evenings will be spent checking if the car is locked and pondering the fact that the local mall is just a dollar store stuck next to a vape shop. And do not even get me started on the drivers. I swear, every other car here either has no turn signals or they are jammed forever. Signaling left but driving straight is business as usual. Nobody even bats an eye. Once I saw someone entering the Taco Bell line in reverse. Traffic laws here are perceived more as gentle suggestions, kind of like the rule about putting the toilet seat down. Welcome to Harlingen. And if you think it is wild here, the next city on our list has somehow turned weirdness into a competitive sport. Number 8. East St. Louis is not just cheap, it is downright dangerous. This community with a population of 18,000, which has lost 78% of its residents since 1950, consistently tops the rankings of the most criminal corners of the USA. And this is not a dramatic exaggeration. In 2023, the level of violence here exceeded the national average by 3.5 times. There were 27 murders for every 18,000 residents. In per capita terms, that is 150 deaths per 100,000. A figure higher than in active war zones of some countries. How did it come to such ruin? The script is sad and predictable. At the end of the 19th century, the city emerged as a powerful industrial hub. Giant meatpacking plants like Swift and Armour roared here. Assembly shops of American steel foundries operated, alongside oil refineries and chemical enterprises. In the first half of the 20th century, during the Great Migration, thousands of African Americans rushed here from the South in search of work. But between 1950 and 1980, the industrial backbone of the region snapped. Meatpacking plants stopped, factories closed their gates, refineries automated processes or moved away, and jobs vanished. Along with the work, the people disappeared too. The white population emigrated en masse to the suburbs of Missouri. This phenomenon, known as white flight, left East St. Louis with a predominantly poor African American community and a decimated tax base. Without budget revenue, the public sector collapsed. Schools fell into decay or were liquidated. The police were left without resources, firefighters with outdated equipment, and roads went without repair. Infrastructure crumbled, replaced by economic despair and crime, drug trafficking, gangs, and armed assaults. The city turned into a war zone. Today, 1 in 3 people here lives below the poverty line, and the median household income barely reaches $27,000. More than 60% of commercial real estate in the center stands empty or in ruins. Entire blocks are dead. There is no business there, only burnt brick and boarded-up windows. You can buy a house in East St. Louis for $30,000 to $40,000. There are options for $10,000, and I have even seen listings for $1,000. But what is the real price of such savings? You will end up in a place where municipal authority exists only nominally, and children go to the worst schools in the state, where the sound of gunshots becomes background noise, and life expectancy is 10 years lower than the average due to chronic stress, violence, and the lack of decent health care. Number 7. Cleveland, Ohio. The state of Ohio is simply stuffed with cities that sank along with their industry and never resurfaced. Youngstown, Toledo, Dayton, they all lost between 40 and 70% of their residents. Since the 50s, this region has been a graveyard for the American industrial dream. Once, Cleveland was the 7th largest metropolis in the USA. In 1950, 904,000 people lived here. It was a titan of industry: steel, automotive manufacturing, spare parts, chemicals. But by 2020, the city had slimmed down by 55%. Today, 352,000 remain. More than 500,000 people left and never looked back. Cleveland's fall happened according to the textbook Rust Belt script: automation, offshoring of factories, disappearance of job vacancies. Next came white flight to the suburbs, the collapse of the tax base, and the degradation of public utilities. Those who stayed were caught in a trap of poverty. This is the biography of dozens of American industrial centers. Housing in neighborhoods like Glenville, Howth, or Collinwood can be picked up for $60,000 to $90,000. These territories were devastated by the white flight of the 60s and 70s, and they still lie in ruins. In Howth, for example, the race riots of 1966 wiped the commercial district off the face of the earth, and it was never rebuilt. The poverty level there reaches 45%. But Cleveland has a trump card that other cheap locations lack: a powerful job market. The Cleveland Clinic is the state's second largest employer, more than 50,000 employees. University hospitals provide jobs for another 30,000. Add to this Case Western Reserve University, Playhouse Square, and the famous orchestra. These are serious institutions with high salaries. So, unlike Gary or East St. Louis, the economy here is alive. It is just strictly geographically segmented. Doctors and professors have settled in suburbia or trendy gentrified zones like Ohio City and Tremont. The poor are blocked in the East Side, which has been rotting for half a century. The average price tag for a house in Cleveland is $86,000. That is less than a fifth of the national standard. The numbers speak eloquently about demand. Housing here is bought only by those who live here or work at the clinic. However, there is a nuance. If you work remotely and have a good income, Cleveland can become a decent option. In safe neighborhoods, it is realistic to find a decent house for $120,000 to $150,000. You do the renovations, and you will have a mortgage of $800 a month. The strategy is entirely workable if you choose the location under a microscope. But shacks for $60,000 in Glenville are financial black holes in neighborhoods that are unlikely to resurrect in your lifetime. Number 6. Eagle Pass, Texas. Here you can snatch up a house for less than $90,000 and admire Mexico right from your porch. This border town resembles a Texan fever dream. Ranch houses, 100-degree heat. Life flows slowly here, neighbors actually wave to you, and the culture is a potent blend of Texan pride and Mexican heritage. The median home price is about $87,000. Life here is 23% cheaper than the national average. The population is solid, over 30,000, and as proof of civilization, there is a Walmart supercenter and a whole 4 Whataburgers. But do not let this affordability blind you. Eagle Pass is located directly on the U.S.-Mexico border. It is beautiful, but at the same time, it is the epicenter of all panic-inducing news stories starting from 2015. However, crime here is not as scary as it is painted. The crime rate is actually lower than in Austin, and significantly lower than St. Louis or Baltimore. A 2023 report indicates Eagle Pass is safer than 60% of American cities of the same size. So perception and reality are different things. As one local aptly noted, everyone thinks we are in danger, but actually the only threat here is forgetting sunscreen. You get the heat, the border flare, and housing for pennies. But in return, you catch side eyes when you tell people where you live. The emotional trade-off is this. You save money, but you spend a heap of time explaining to relatives that Eagle Pass is not a set for a post-apocalyptic series from Netflix. Imagine, you wake up to the aroma of morning tacos, a warm wind from the Rio Grande, and cumbia rhythm somewhere in the distance. You step out onto the street, dusty boots, dark sunglasses. The whole city feels like a western that got Wi-Fi. Quiet, colorful, and cheaper than your last vacation. Eagle Pass is safer than most metropolises. But people still panic at the phrase border town. Meanwhile, in San Francisco, houses are 1,300,000, and shop windows are robbed in broad daylight. Go figure. At least here the view from the porch is not a pothole, like in Bay City. Would you agree to live on the border if it meant owning your own home for less than $90,000? Write in the comments. Number 5. Memphis, Tennessee. This is a city of contrasts. There are wealthy enclaves, East Memphis, Germantown, Collierville. In these suburbs, real estate price tags start from $300,000. But there is another side to the coin, sectors where housing is given away for $50,000 to $70,000. The reason for such generosity is specific and terrifying: endemic violence. The crime rate here is not just high, it is extreme. In 2023, 302 murders occurred in Memphis. That is 48 deaths per 100,000 population. For comparison, this is twice as high as in Chicago, 21 per 100,000, and almost 4 times exceeds the national average. Memphis has permanently cemented its place in the top 5 most dangerous cities in the USA. Budget locations, Fraser, Whitehaven, parts of South and North Memphis, are cheap for a reason. These are epicenters of destitution. From 40 to 50% of residents live below the poverty line. Violence reigns here. Shootouts are an almost nightly routine. Public schools have the worst ratings in the state, and investors avoid these places like the plague. Take Fraser, for example. A population of 45,000, poverty level, 38%. The average family income is a pitiful $7,000. There are more churches here than supermarkets because retailers consider the area too dangerous and unprofitable. It is a true food desert, where you have to drive several miles for fresh produce. On top of that, there is one of the highest sales taxes in the country here, 9.5%. And although Tennessee does not levy a state income tax, the authorities recoup this with substantial property taxes and this draconian percentage at the register. So this is not exactly the fiscal paradise that some YouTubers try to sell you. The labor market is dominated by FedEx, the main employer with a staff of 30,000. But most vacancies there are warehouse and logistics jobs for $18 an hour. High-paying professional work is scarce, except perhaps in medicine or corporate services. So yes, you can buy a house for $60,000. But you will end up in a block where a third of the neighboring houses stand empty or destroyed. You will hear gunshots so often that you will stop flinching. The police will take 45 minutes or longer to respond to a non-urgent call, and your children will end up in schools where 70% of students cannot read properly. Number 4. Kansas City, Kansas. It is the poor twin of the greater metropolitan area. They share a name and sit side by side, separated only by the state line, but the gulf between them is colossal. In Kansas City, the average income is half as much, $57,000 versus $95,000 for its neighbor, and the poverty rate is almost twice as high, 20% versus 10%. Housing here is affordable, on average $120,000, because this is a post-industrial center in a state of slow decline. Legendary meatpacking plants and factories that fed thousands of families vanished between the 60s and the 80s. The auto industry also faded into history. The General Motors assembly line in Fairfax halted back in 1987. Demographics have been stagnating or shrinking for decades. The peak of 168,000 residents was left behind in 1970. Currently, 156,000 live here. This figure stays afloat exclusively thanks to an influx of immigrants from Latin America who are lured by the low cost of living. Furthermore, the city is deeply divided, economically and racially. The western districts, closer to the suburbs, are inhabited mainly by the white middle class, and real estate there starts from $160,000. But the east and northeast, Argentine, Quindaro, are predominantly Black and Hispanic communities. The poverty level here reaches 25 to 35%, and houses cost $60,000 to $100,000. The brutal reality is this: these neighborhoods are cheap because they are isolated. The business landscape consists of cheap eateries, liquor stores, pawn shops, and fast food. There is neither capital investment nor development. You can buy a house for 90 to 100,000, but you will end up in an environment where 1 in 3 is struggling, where street gangs and drug trafficking are everyday life. Your investment will not appreciate in value because economic drivers simply do not exist. This is not an opportunity. This is a trap in a place that was forgotten 40 years ago. Number 3. Toledo, Ohio. This is one of those places where you can buy a home for 80,000, walk to a nationally ranked zoo, and immediately trip over a broken sidewalk next to an abandoned video rental store. Once the industrial pride of the Great Lakes, and now a fascinating cheap Frankenstein of sand, ambition, and surprisingly tasty food. Here, old-school Midwestern grit meets redevelopment just enough to keep your attention. The median price tag for a house is $119,000. Life here is 25% cheaper than the national average. Bonuses: a world-class zoo, a minor league hockey team, and that type of neighbor who first helps you shovel snow and then treats you to chili. But let's be realistic. In Toledo, there are thriving neighborhoods, and there are those where it is better not to kill the engine while you check the mailbox. The level of violence is about twice the national norm, and property crimes are even more popular. Not fatal, but annoying enough to force you to lock your trash can. The job market runs on education, medicine, and blue-collar professions. You will not become a millionaire, but perhaps you will finally have something of your own. As a Reddit user aptly noted, Toledo is the weird middle child city, cool if you treat it well, but guaranteed to throw a brick through your window if you don't. The deal is this: you spend less on housing than most people do on a gym membership, but as a burden, you get weird neighbors, flash floods, and a city that is still trying to figure out what it wants to be when it grows up. You will save cash, but risk leaving a wheel in a pothole the size of a crater. And do not even get me started on the weather. Snow dumps when the forecast promises sun. It rains during parades. And summer, it is just mosquito season with humidity so thick you can chew it. Imagine, you step out of your fully paid-off house for 90,000. There is a slight chill in the air. It smells of fresh pastries from the Polish bakery around the corner, and somewhere 3 blocks away someone is firing up a snowblower. It is peaceful. It is real. And likely, by dinner, snow will be falling horizontally. Toledo is safer than Flint. Would you buy real estate where the zoo is flawless, but your block risks becoming the hero of the next episode of a before and after renovation show? Write in the comments, Team Toledo or definitely not. This city is cheap, stubborn, and full of surprises, like your dad's old armchair. If it came with free parking and a view of a glass factory, and if you think Toledo is bizarre, the next location has made weirdness its official motto, and somehow it works. Number 2. Birmingham, Alabama. Birmingham is not as extremely cheap as Detroit or Gary, but it is still significantly more affordable than national standards. The main reason is that the city never recovered from the deindustrialization of the 70s and 80s. Founded in 1871 as an industrial hub, Birmingham grew in a valley rich in iron, limestone, and coal, the triad of resources needed to smelt steel. For almost a century, it remained the metallurgical heart of the South. The U.S. Steel Corporation kept its largest southern outpost here, where over 30,000 people worked at the peak of the 60s. But when the industry collapsed under the pressure of foreign competition and automation, the blow was devastating. Thousands were left without work. The population shrank from 360,000 to the current 200,000. The city lost 46% of its residents. Moreover, Birmingham has a heavy racial legacy. In the 50s and 60s, it became one of the epicenters of the civil rights movement precisely because of the extreme brutality of local segregation. The tragic bombing at the 16th Street Baptist Church in 1963, which took the lives of 4 African-American girls, happened right here. Water cannons and police dogs against peaceful demonstrators, that was here too. These events left deep scars on the social and economic fabric of the city, which are still felt today. Modern Birmingham is deeply divided. Wealthy suburbs hide behind the mountains, Mountain Brook, Vestavia Hills, Homewood. Mostly wealthy white people live there, and real estate costs from $400,000 to $1 million. In contrast, urban districts, Ensley, Woodlawn, parts of the West End, are predominantly African American neighborhoods where the poverty level reaches 45% and houses sell for $60,000 to $110,000. You can buy decent housing for $120,000 to $140,000, or even for $60,000 in depressed zones. But included in the package will be bad schools, high crime, and zero prospects for asset appreciation. Despite a strong medical sector, the city's overall economy pales in comparison to neighbors like Atlanta or Nashville, which have developed rapidly in recent decades. It is cheaper here than the national average simply because this place is less attractive to live in. It is that simple. Number 1. Detroit, Michigan. This name has become synonymous with the worst-case scenario for post-industrial America. Once the fourth largest metropolis in the USA, Detroit has lost over 1.2 million residents, minus 66% of the population. This is an absolute record low in the country's history. The former icon of industrial might turned into a monument of urban catastrophe. In June 2013, the city filed for bankruptcy, the largest municipal fiasco in U.S. history, with a debt of $18 to $20 billion. The treasury emptied, and basic services collapsed. Police responded to emergency calls in an average of 52 minutes, almost an hour. 40% of streetlights went out, plunging neighborhoods into darkness, and firefighters fought fires with equipment that belonged in a museum. The scale of the ruin is staggering, 78,000 abandoned structures. Just think about it. That is more than the entire population of many cities. Add to this 66,000 vacant lots, land where homes once stood but were demolished or burned down. Entire neighborhoods turned into wastelands. You can drive for miles and see only boarded-up, charred skeletons of former homes. In locations like Brightmoor, Barton McFarland, or on the expanses of the East Side, real estate is given away for $5,000 to $15,000. On online auctions, lots start from as low as $1,000. $1,000 for a 2-story cottage with 3 bedrooms and a basement. What is the catch? A colossal surplus. Supply here overwhelms demand so much that the price tag drops to the cost of demolition. A house for $600 is effectively a plea. Take it so we do not have to pay $10,000 to demolish it. In any case, subscribe to the channel for more analysis on how to live in the United States without housing consuming all your money. Because these prices are real, these cities exist, and for some people, moving to a place nobody wants is exactly the right strategy to build the financial life everyone wants.